Okay. This is going to be a familiar thing you see in this class. It's me trying to prep you for a test, but this is the first test of the year. Okay. You got to start that bar hard because if you don't, you're just climbing that hill the rest of the year. You got to start it high, folks. So these videos go through the test prep section, right? It's going to tell you the type of sections that are going to be in each parts of the test, the types of things you need to know for each part. If you take good notes on this, or if you just watch these videos over and over and over and over again, you're going to get a lot of information about what you need to know for the test. And I go pretty quick because you can pause, you can rewind, you can replay. As a matter of fact, replay this about 10 times. Listen to it in your sleep, listen to it during the day. You go walk for a walk, you listen to it, then you just listen to it every time you get a chance to, and you'll pass the test as long as you absorb the information. All right, so this test, first section, 8 questions, and it's matching. You're going to have people or ideas or events, and you're going to match them with the statements. Quite simple. You're going to use each one of these people, places, things, or ideas one time only. So once you use them, you don't have to worry about it anymore. So the first thing you should know is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Kansas-Nebraska Act causes Bleeding Kansas. It repeals the Missouri Compromise, and basically it says, yeah, we can make free or slave states in the West as long as we vote on them. And it's going to cause the ball rolling towards Bleeding Kansas as well as other things. The Dred Scott decision. You had a slave who moved from a slave state to a free state and sued for his freedom in court. And the court came back and said, nope, even though you are in a free state, you still don't get your freedom. And it actually went further than that, saying that people of African descent didn't have rights that the Constitution had to adhere to or protect. Bleeding Kansas, again, was caused by the Kansas-Nebraska Act, was a bunch of Northerners and Southerners going into Kansas to try to vote to make it either a free state or vote to make it a slave state. And this causes 2 years, about 200 dead of, I mean, you're talking fierce fighting. You're talking knife to knife, hand to hand, rifle to rifle fighting. It's kind of a prelude to the Civil War. The Lincoln Douglas debates was a series of 7 debates between Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln for a seat in the U.S. or the Illinois legislature. Lincoln's going to lose. These debates were primarily about slavery. He's going to lose this Senate seat, but he is going to become president in a few years. So just hang on there, Lincoln. Nat Turner Rebellion was a slave who fought for his freedom, and he did some really horrible things, though. One, fighting for freedom, great. Killing a bunch of people, not so great. He killed his master, but he also killed their infant child. They also took knives and went to a local building next to the plantation, which was a school, and killed people there. Eventually, the Nat Turner Rebellion was put down. Again, people with guns versus people without guns. Typically, the people with guns win, and this is what happened here. And yeah, he was tortured afterwards. John Brown, guy with the big beard, he's the guy that took over a base of the military to try to arm his slaves because he's first armed them with pikes, which are basically spears, but he wanted to arm them with guns so they can actually have a revolution. He was responsible for the Potawatomi massacre. Remember, he's anti-slavery and was willing to put his life on the line, which he did, and he also took some lives along with that. Uncle Tom's Cabin, it's the only book that we talked about during this entire unit. So if you see anything about a book, then you know it's Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's a book about the horrors of slavery. And then Harriet Tubman. If you don't know anything about Harriet Tubman, man, you missed some stuff. She was leader of the Underground Railroad, or conductor on the Underground Railroad. She was a spy. She was a nurse. She was one of the first women to actually lead a military campaign. She actually led a military campaign on plantations that freed slaves. She's by far one of my favorite people in this particular unit. So that's the first section. The first section is pretty simple. It's just matching. We're going to use one of those terms, people, places, things, or ideas once. The next section, questions 9 through 13, give or take, is going to be true or false. And it's really simple. I'm going to give you a statement. You tell me it's true or false. I even underline the word in the statement that you need to focus on. So like, is this word correct? So like, you need to know what jumping the broom was, right? It was a marriage between slaves. You need to know who fired the first shot at Fort Sumter. It was the Confederates did. It wasn't the Union. The Confederates shot the first shot. You need to know slave states versus free states. Other than just slavery, what other differences were there? Remember, slave states, violence breeds violence. If you see violence, you're going to see violence. You're going to see violence. You're eventually going to commit violence. They were more violent in the slave states than they were in the free states. because they saw his violence so much. Know what John Brown armed his slaves with. Was it guns or was it pikes? Yeah, it was pikes. He owned them with spears because it was hard to train them with guns initially, because remember, slaves weren't allowed to hold guns. And also know about the election of 1860. How Abraham Lincoln won, but he wasn't on the ballot in a lot of the states in the South. So he won he didn't win those states, but he won enough states to become president, and some states didn't even have him on the ballot. So just imagine that for those states. Like, oh wait, who Lincoln won what? The next section is multiple choice. Pretty simple. You pick A, B, C, or D, and you're gonna need to know things like what type of question should you be asking in history class? What three-letter word is super important in history class? Here's a hint. Why is the hint. You should be asking why these things are happening. The what, when, where, who, those are somewhat important, but not as important of why these events take place. So then we can actually make estimations and guesses and hypotheses of what's going to happen in the future based on why it happened in the past the way it did. You should know the one invention I talked about this unit, and that's the cotton gin. The cotton gin pushed this American need. I should say need. I should say want for cheap labor in the form of slavery, because now you have this device that can separate the cotton, but you still need a workforce to actually take the cotton out of the fields. And that workforce came in the form of taking people as property. And that's where the moral compass comes in. You should know the election of which president caused the succession of the Southern states. There's really one president I talked about this entire time, and that's Lincoln. So if you get a question about a president who was elected or whatever, it's really going to be Lincoln this for this first unit, because he's the only president I really talked about this unit. The battle, what was the battle that started the Civil War? Fort Sumter. This is where the shots were first shot out by the Confederates first, by the South first. So yeah, Fort Sumter. And what caused fighting and bleeding Kansas? The Kansas-Nebraska Act. I've said that a bunch of times. Just know Kansas-Nebraska Act led to bleeding Kansas, which also led to these other things that took place. The next section of the test is fill in the blank. History is not about good guys versus bad guys. It's about what? Perspective. Know about who was caned on the Senate floor. We talked about in that class. It's going to be something you have to look on your own. Know about the ship that killed about 130 slaves for insurance money and got their money. Know what that ship was called. The last section of the test is short answer. There's 3 questions. And these questions are kind of broken up into do this or do this. So you're going to have options for these short answer questions. You're just going to choose which one you know the most about. So the first question on these short answer questions has to do with 2 things. 1, describe the slave ships and how they were built different than other ships. Remember that big ship on my whiteboard that you could look at, and I described all these details about the nets and about how the guns faced inwards and all these other details about how that ship was designed that was different than other ships. You can either do that for that question, or you can talk about how specific things that were done to the slaves on the ships. The forced feeding, right? Where men and women were located and why. Okay? The forced exercise and why. So that's the first question on the short answer. The next one is kind of more detailed about life in America as a slave. So you can do 1, name 2 specific punishments. I'm not saying, don't say they were killed. That's not specific, nor necessarily is it really a punishment that I'm looking for here. I'm looking for they were branded. You could take that as kind of like a tortured punishment type of thing. Their parts of their feet were chopped off or maimed so they couldn't run away. They were whipped with a cat o' nine tails. Okay, so and there's more than just that. That's just like the first version. You can either do that, or you could tell me about what they did to the slaves prior to auctions. They fed them more, right? They dyed their hair so they didn't have any gray hair, so they looked younger. They would put perfume on them. They'd bathe them. They'd make their cheeks and their face look younger with putting different types of material on them. So you could do any of those things for the second question, okay? And the last question should be easy. Hopefully you did your John Brown debate, because if you did your John Brown debate, the last question of the test will be super easy. I'm not even going to tell you what it is, because it's going to be super easy if you did the project. With that said, that is the first unit test wrap up. Make sure that you study, get that good grade on the first test. So then it's easy money, man. It's a downhill walk instead of an uphill struggle. All right, we'll see you in class. Good luck on your test.